Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. I apologize I did not record an episode last week, but I was in Arkansas doing a little trout fishing, which is good because that's what's given me the idea for this podcast this afternoon. I've been up trout fishing in Arkansas. I think this was the 5th year I've gone. Now, I haven't gone for probably the last 4 years or so. It was probably before COVID that I actually was up there trout fishing, but I've been up there at the same river many times, and it's always a good experience. We always fish in the same spot. There's boats that you rent in a town called Heber Springs, and that we always do the same, but we don't ever stay at the same house for some reason. I don't know why. But I had found this house, and it looked pretty good. It had a dock down where you could fish off of the dock, or when we're running the boats, we would be able to fish that way. But when we pulled up to the house, I was a little concerned that we might have the wrong house because there was a dog on the front porch, almost like it was guarding the house. And I looked back at the VRBO directions and house number, and it seemed to match up. Didn't really know what to do with the situation. Didn't know how aggressive or not aggressive that the dog would be. It was definitely guarding the front door, and when we got out of our vehicles, it was barking a little bit like it was its house. And so I approached the house, and as I got closer to the house, the dog stopped barking, and it had a little football there by the front door. And so I picked up the football and threw it, and the dog enjoyed that and went running after the football. And as we're unloading all the stuff, the dog's just kind of hanging out, really well behaved, not going into the house as the doors opened. It would go up to the threshold, but it would kind of look at you, and we didn't say for it to go in, and it didn't go in, and it stayed outside. The property manager, or the maintenance man for the place, ended up coming by as we were unloading and wanted to look at a couple things inside the house. And we were asking about the dog, and his answer was basically he wasn't sure where the dog came from. I think he had been on a vacation for like 10 days or so, and when he got back, the dog was there. And he suspected it was really from a tenant or something, a couple before we had gotten there. So he suspected the dog had maybe been there 2 or 3 weeks already. And the dog didn't look malnourished. Its fur wasn't overly matted or anything like that. It was really a short-haired dog anyways. But we didn't know what the deal was with the dog. So we got all of our stuff unloaded, and some of the people in the group were wanting to bring the dog in the house, and I just said, no way. I was the one that rented it. I didn't say I was bringing in a dog. I didn't want the dog. I didn't know if the dog was potty trained, if the dog would chew anything up. It looked like a younger dog. And I read everyone the riot act. I'm like, I'm the one who rented this place. My name's on it. If there's something with the deposit that is going to, that they're going to, have to charge against the deposit because of any damages or whatever to the house, or because there's a pet in there and we didn't say there's going to be a pet. I didn't want to deal with it. And so I told them no. Well, that night it was going to get pretty cold. I don't know how cold it had been during the however long that dog had been in the area, but it was going to get down to like around 19, 20 degrees. And frankly, that's, to me at least, a little cold for having a pet outside. And so they were all petitioning once again for the dog to come in. And I said, no, the dog's been able to survive this far in the winter. The dog's going to be fine. And I wasn't real sure about that, but I was kind of sticking to my guns on that. As always, I never sleep really well at night, so I'm just wandering around the house and moving around from the room that I was in out to the main living area, where I was on the couch for a good part of the evening. And I also thought that, well, I'd be able to hear if the dog was pawing at the door or whatever, trying to get in because it was really cold. My brother had put a blanket out by the front of the door, and that was just kind of where it was going to have to stay warm. And so about 1 a.m, I really thought, I looked at my phone to see what the temperature was. It was already down to like 24 or something like that. And I was really about to bring the dog in, but I'm like, nope, not going to do it. Well, about 5:30, 6 in the morning, it's still dark. It's really the coldest part of the night, and I'm just starting to feel bad. So I go and I look out the window, and I don't see the dog out there. I look on the blanket, and I don't see the dog. And I thought, well, good. Maybe it found another place. Maybe it's someone else let the dog in the house, because there's other homes around there. And just kind of walked away from the door. But then, 5 minutes later, curiosity gets the best of me, and no one else is awake yet at this point because, like I said, it's 5:30 in the morning probably. And I open the door, and the dog is there, right at the threshold, and the dog's shaking. And, I felt bad, so I told the dog. It still wouldn't come in. I told the dog, "Come on," and then it came in, and it just stood there in kind of the entryway. And so I sat down on the ground. I put the dog on my lap. I put my arms around the dog, and gave it some body heat for. Honestly, it only stayed there for about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and then it was trying to climb off my lap, but to just try to warm the dog up. Well, the dog was really well behaved. It seems like it was house trained and house broken. It would jump up on the couch like it knew what couches were. It never chewed on anything. It never had an accident or anything inside the house. It was definitely hungry. So the dog came in the house when everyone woke up. Everyone gave me grief about the fact that I let the dog in, and I said, well, it was cold, and I felt bad for the dog. And then I kind of laid down the new law. The dog can stay in the house as long as we're in the house, but when we go out fishing during the day, the dog needs to go outside. And everyone was good with that. Everyone agreed and so forth. So for the rest of the trip, the dog stayed in the house all night long. Once again, never had an accident. I'd let it out once or twice at night just as I kind of wandered around. It would just run out, go to the bathroom, come back in. It was a great dog. In fact, I would have loved to have kept the dog. But I've got one of my own and potentially might end up with a second one, and I did not need a potential third dog. So one of the guys in the group was going to maybe take it to his house and if need be, take it to a shelter. And then my brother was kind of thinking the same. He was hoping he might know someone, but if nothing else, take the dog to the shelter. And so that's just kind of the premise we went on till that morning when we all got up. And then my brother came to me and said, Greg, I'm thinking about it. It's probably not the best idea. It's not going to go well with my dog that I've got there. He didn't think his wife was going to be too fond of the idea. And he started kind of backing out. And I'm like, well, I guess we can always take the dog with me. And one of the guys that was riding with me said that he would try to find a home for it or take it to a shelter. The problem was we're riding in my truck, and we already had 4 people in my truck, and that's about all my truck holds. And there was really no room for the dog to sit. And my son was not going to be real happy about that situation at all, and he made it very clear. Long story short, my brother ended up taking the dog, or saying he was going to take the dog, but he was trying to get the dog to jump up in the car when he was getting ready to leave, and the dog would not jump up in the car. And it's almost like they were afraid, him and his son, to pick up the dog, and I'd already picked him up multiple times. And so I just went over there and I picked him up and put him in the back of his car. And it was one of those where the hatch of the car closes and closes slowly. So I was hoping the dog wouldn't dart out, trying to get my hand in there to the last minute. The dog seemed a little uncertain, but the hatch closed, and he ended up driving off with the dog. I called him probably like an hour later to see how it was going. He said, not well. The dog had thrown up all of its breakfast. It had been just crying and was visibly just upset, shaking. I did not like leaving the place that it had been staying, and was having a lot of anxiety about it, which is crazy when you think about it, because the dog had no owner. The dog was guarding a house that was empty. Every time we drove away to go fishing, we kind of thought the dog was thinking, well, there goes another, whatever he was associating us with. And he was going to be on his own again. And he was always happy when we came back, and there's no one feeding him. And we were. He was stuck outside in the cold, and we brought him in. So in every respect, you would think that the dog would have thought, you know what? Wow, someone's keeping me. I'm safe. I'm around people. But the dog was very anxious and upset about it. And what's crazy is you would think that wouldn't be the case. But the dog was more comfortable with the dysfunction of what it did know versus what might lie before it. Which got me to thinking, isn't that how it is with us sometimes? Especially in our relationship with God. Sometimes we're just afraid of what God might have in store for us. And so we hold on tight to lesser things. We refuse to follow God to where He might lead us, to things that might be a significant improvement or change from where we're at, or the dysfunction that we're living in. And so we just refuse to go along. And so sometimes I think we forfeit those blessings that He might have in store. But then there's other times, because of His great love for us, He won't allow us to stay in it. And because the dog was just such a great dog, we were not going to allow that dog, even though its desire was to stay behind, we weren't going to allow that to happen. And so just picked up the dog, and the dog was going whether it liked it or not. Sometimes God does that with us because of His great love, because of what He knows that He has in store for us. He just he forces us into sometimes maybe a very uncomfortable situation in which we're scared. We don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe we're whimpering. Maybe we're whining. Maybe we're shaking in fear, kind of like the dog was, right? But we have to trust that God knows what's best. We have to recognize where God's leading us. It was that way for the early church. Before Jesus went into heaven, He told His followers, He said to stay there till the Holy Spirit came. And when the Holy Spirit came, in the power of the Holy Spirit, they're to go forth and to be His witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, all the way to the ends of the earth. And you know what His followers did when the Holy Spirit came? They stayed right there. They didn't want to leave. They were afraid of leaving. And so they weren't going to go anywhere. But God wanted them to go somewhere else for the betterment of them, but also for the betterment of humanity. And so He had to force them a bit. He brought about a great persecution on the early church. And a lot of the early faithful were being not only persecuted, some of them were being put to death. And it caused a great scattering of followers of Christ across the basically known world at that time. And ultimately, not only was God's will done, but it was for the betterment of them and for the betterment of humanity altogether. I don't know where you're at in your life. I don't know what God is currently doing in your life right now, but we need to be open to following the will of God. And I think most of the time we recognize what the will of God is, but oftentimes we're just kind of afraid to follow it. And I just encourage you to trust God in that, because sometimes we're holding on to a lesser quality of life. We're holding on to dysfunction because we're afraid for what God has in store for us. Trust God and follow God as He leads you. Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk, and I look forward to talking to you next week.